Before you're going, I want to say sorry if you hear like a yipping dog in the background. A couple apartments down, there's a dog that like has separation anxiety and just like loses it every time their owner's gone. So I deal with this a lot if I'm working at home for the day. I hope it is not really prevalent on the audio. If it is, I apologize. And I will re-record if needed. So first, quick tip before I get in the main topic today, I just want to say, go out prepared because stuff happens. I made a post a couple days ago about how I'm like terrible at checking the weather for shorter runs. And the main point was that I always carry a couple of plastic bags that are like double done in my bag, because if I get caught in the rain, I at least would like my phone not to get ruined. This caused a couple people to point out that maybe I should check the weather because, lightning is scary and whatnot, and very valid point. Some of this is because I set a lot of my habits regarding weather in New Mexico and Arizona, where it just doesn't ever rain, but I could definitely use to get better and try. I always check before going out on long runs. I check before I go out, don't have service. So it's usually I'm going to get stuck for a mile or two near the city where I live. And it's because I'm trying to slam training in the middle of my busy day, but there is some point for improvement there. I used to be a lot dumber. I've ended up in a slot canyon without checking the weather. That was not my finest moment in the wilderness. I have climbed things that I shouldn't be climbing, proper shoes or whatever. Not great. So you do dumb stuff when you're younger and you grow and learn. And one of the things that I've definitely gotten better at doing is checking the weather, but there's still a lot of room for growth there. And some of the things that I used to think were overkill from my college roommate when he and I would go out on hikes is now a part of my standard pack, like extra water and some food and electrolytes and a light, no matter when I'm headed out, because things happen. Also carry a safety thermal blanket, a lighter wrapped in duct tape, and some toilet paper. These are things that you might consider, you might not. You have to kind of fit what works for you. I always go out with water because I live in a desert, and lately I carry even more of it. Just be safe because stuff happens in the wilderness, and the peace out there is one of the primary reasons why it's so enjoyable, but it also means that having some extra stuff like a gel or a lighter or an extra 50 milliliters of fluid is better if you really need it. And if not, it's just a little bit of extra weight that puts some extra strength training on your legs. So go out prepared if you can. Now, let's talk about burnout. So burnout is common. And I want to get 3 ways that over the years I've worked to battle long-term burnout, because I've had it a lot. When I was driving snowcats, I loved that job, but it also required, or I chose to lean into working 70 plus hour night shifts per week. And that was tiring. And I knew it was short term, so that helped a lot. That is one of the things that we can kind of use for burnout, is if you know that you have a short-term goal, we can often push through that short term, but it doesn't always create the best lasting relationship with something. If I know that I'm going to be working 70 plus hour weeks in the winter doing something I really love, but it's only going to be 4 to 5 months, and then I get to do whatever I really want for the summer, that is a different story from knowing that this is a lifelong thing that I get to do year round. And burnout is really common in ultra running because it requires a good amount of training, or at least you're going to do better if you have a good amount of training. So first, what is burnout? Why do we get it? I guess it is because the demands in your life are consistently exceeding your abilities to get them done. And this is all the demands. It is not just your training or just your work. So if you have a big training block and you also have to clean your house and work and do some things to take care of family and blah, 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 all of the stuff that you have to do, and there just doesn't feel like enough time in the day to get it done. And then most of us still need a little time to ourselves. You are likely pushing towards burnout, and people have different capacities to deal with this, and you can learn to push yours, but to some degree, like some people are just going to be better working the constant 12-hour work weeks than others, and that's okay. You have to work with you and what you have and what you can do. So I haven't done one of these in a while, and that was why I was kind of burnt out from all of the work. This is race week. So the past, or race time of year, is a big race time of year. So the past few weeks, I've had at least 3 athletes racing pretty much every weekend in conjunction with my job and my dog and all these things. And like, I just haven't even had time to clean my house or do laundry, or I couldn't make time, if we're going to be more accurate. And just realized like I needed a pause, which we'll get to. So symptoms of burnout, in case you're curious, are like constant, persistent, or mental exhaustion. So if somebody asks you how you're doing, and the answer is always like, I'm so tired, then you might be pushing towards burnout. Another one is a lack of joy doing things that you once loved. Like if you love to run and you don't want to run and you don't know why you want to run, we might be leading a little bit towards burnout. And then decreased human connection. And this is both a cause and an effect, kind of like depression, where a lack of human connection can push you into depression or burnout. And then once you're there, you are less likely to want to reach out and create human connection. So we end up in this cyclical pattern where often interacting with another human being, especially face-to-face, is the answer. And it's like the last thing you want to do when you're in one of those spaces. So really long endurance sports tend to be a bit of a recipe for burnout. Training for an ultra often peaks at like 10 plus hours per week. It doesn't have to, but it often does. Ironmans can peak at like 15, even if you're trying to just finish, because you have to be competent in like 3 different sports, not to mention the travel time and like the money you spend and all of the stuff that you do to do these sports can definitely lead to some burnout. So it's really common. I talk about it a lot with my athletes and people I know, and I don't hear about it a lot. I listen to a lot of podcasts about trail and ultra running, and I just don't hear a ton about burnout. It's like, at best, it's kind of mentioned. It's like a side thing that might happen here and there, or something to be aware of, but very rarely do I hear people just dive into it. And I think some of that is because a lot of the like very public figures in this space just care so much about running. Like they run, their spouses often run, they run professionally, or they're a coach and their kids might run. They talk about running on podcasts and blog about it on iRunFar or ultrarunning.com or outside. And then they study running in their free time and they read books about it, like whatever. Like there's a lot, they're just in it a lot and they love it. And it doesn't bother them that much. And all of that's great. That's why I try to learn from a lot of these people, because they're obsessed with it, and obsessed people just have a ton of often very useful information. But that's not everyone. I'd argue it's probably not even most of us who run ultras. Even if we wanted our lives to be like completely consumed by running, many of us have like full-time jobs and pets and families and maybe lots of kids. And some of them really just want us to stop talking about running. And further, like, even if all of that's not true, maybe you just don't want your life to be completely about running. Like maybe you love it and you love doing it and you love spending like some long days out there in the trails and you get your weekly in, but you also like climbing or whatever. Like I like running trails a lot. It has become a peace space for me, which is weird because many years ago I hated running. So running trails being my like happy mind central space is odd. But I also like lifting and climbing, and I have a puppy who I love and a full-time job that had full-ish time job that has little to do with running. And I'm single, so while that makes scheduling a lot easier, it also means I get to do all of this stuff around my house, like cleaning and laundry and whatever. And as a result, I have a lot of interests that I just don't have time to do. And that kind of sucks. Like I love cooking. It is one of the things that used to bring me a lot of happiness. And I just don't really do it anymore. I make stuff that's much more function than fun. And there's probably a lot of you that do have interests that you want to do that you just don't really know how to make time for effectively. And it's not a huge deal, but I'd say, like, I'd be lying if I said I didn't wish there were more hours in a day. And then on top of all that, like, most ultra runners I meet, myself included, are like fairly, or at least somewhat driven people who like to be good at what they do. And while in my day job, I often have to try and convince people that like 10 minutes of walking a day is a good idea, or they need to get into the gym more than once a week. Like if we see a running plan, like a training plan that has the 10-hour week on it, then it might feel like a failure if you don't hit all those runs. And that can be really tough. So burnout is real, and there are a few things you can do about it. So like one of them is really connecting to your why. I realize this is often overplayed. Like I really like Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, but I feel like there's this constant thing about finding your why and finding this deeper thing. Running an ultra is a lot. Like running really far is a lot. It requires a good amount of training and effort, and you don't have to do it. If you're just trying to do something hard, there are other things you could do, like take a daily ice bath. It sucks. I do not like ice baths, but they take like 2 minutes and they crank your dopamine, and it's really hard. So if you have no time and you just want to do something really difficult that cranks your dopamine, try that. But if you think about running for like 10 hours per week and it brings you dread or exhaustion just thinking about it, then this might not be your sport, and that's okay. So we need to find some why or some connection, and it doesn't need to be this like overarching, I run for whatever. It might just be that you like the way you feel after you run, or you feel like you're a better partner to your spouse, or I feel like I'm a better dog dad when I like take 30 to 60 minutes and disappear into the woods with or without him. It makes me a better person. So I like it. It doesn't need to be this huge thing, but it can be. It really depends for you. Some people run for charity, and I think that's beautiful, and that is a big driving factor. Some of the runs I do are tests because I really want to be a great coach, and testing stuff on myself is a great way to make me better at my job. So having some why is helpful. Now, if you can't really figure this out, you're not sure if you like running, but you still want to do one anyway, ease into it. Take a couple months and see if you even like the activity. There's actually something that's something I require from people who are trying to do the like 0 to 100 thing, often after reading some book by some famous dude. And you need to take a couple months to figure out if you even like it. If not, like try a Spartan. They're shorter and require less training, and you get to do a wide variety of things, so they're a little less taxing on the brain. So figure out why you want to do this. And if you decide that you really love it, you have some why connection, no matter what it may be, then lean into that. Like I love being on the trails, the mountains. And again, I said it makes me kind of a better person. And like I ended up on a secluded trail in a park for like 5 minutes of a half an hour run today, and it was worth the entire rest of it that ended up being largely on roads. Like know why you do this thing, connect to it, and that's going to help a lot, especially in the short term. Because if you're in like a month, like pretty heavy training block where you're peaking and leading up to a race, that is like prime time for burnout. And you can push through that short period if you have a bigger why in mind. It just helps. So there's that. 2, we should also probably take a break once in a while. If you love running year round and that's all you love to do and it's all you want to do and it's like how you want to spend all your time, then don't take a break. That's fine. But most of us benefit from it. Even like the high professionals like Killian and Jim, like take months off in the winter to do skimo. Other people do cross-country skiing. I've mentioned before that I'm currently loving following Heather Hart's like pursuing of mountain biking, because she got burnout of running and wanted to pursue something different, which is, I don't know, respectable from a coach who has built an entire foundation from training runners. So the fact that like occasionally you might just need a break. And if you're worried you'll come back worse, you might, but that's okay. Like you don't need to stay peaked year round. That's why we call it a peak. You should have some dip offs. And if you don't want to take a giant step back, then maintain a few miles a week to keep up your skill practice. That could easily be like 3 to 5 days a week of 10 to 20-minute sessions, just really focusing on the skill of running. And then just do something else that keeps your cardio up. So there's a lot of people who will like touch in with running and then just do skiing or backcountry or touring or whatever all winter long. And that helps a lot because it keeps some variety throughout your year. And you'll come back fine. You might even come back stronger. And a nice side benefit here is it prevents you kind of falling apart when and if you get injured, because a lot of runners get hurt and a lot of runners fall apart when they get hurt. And some of that is because we often connect very deeply with the activities we do. So if you're completely invested in this like one activity, it becomes very difficult when you can't do it. Again, running has a really high injury rate, so the odds that you'll at least get a bit of a niggle are pretty high. And if we know what we're looking for and we know how to fix it, we can often typically keep those pretty short term. But if we don't know what we're doing and we don't know how to fix it and we push through it, that injury can really turn into a problem. And then you're out for a while. And since we become what we do, like I am a runner, and I mean, sure, I am, but I'm also a lot of things. And if I couldn't run, it would be tough, but doable. And I say this from the place that I couldn't really run for 8 months this year. Whenever I ran for more than a mile, I ended up with a 2-hour coughing fit from asthma. And due to medical things being what they are, it took a long time to fix and get diagnosed. So if you aren't a single activity, it tends to help. If you figure out that, like for me, I'm a hard worker who loves the outdoors, and I express that through running. I also express it through climbing and hiking and being out there with my dog. And if you can express yourself through more than one activity, if that activity goes away for whatever reason, it doesn't ruin you. And then finally, a third way that we can work to combat burnout is just finding a plan that actually fits your schedule. Your training plan has to fit your schedule and not the other way around. Running an ultra definitely requires a certain amount of training for most people. There are some who can just go send it, but even they would do better if they really cared about peak performance with some training. So for most of us, it requires a certain amount of training to even get through it without getting hurt. But that training has to fit your schedule and fit you and fit everything else that you do. If you work 3 or 4 12-hour night shifts a week, your training plan should look different than the person who works a normal 9 to 5, because one of those tends to be a little more stressful than others. If you can't handle these big long runs because you just can't be out of your house for that long, then we might need to do 2-a-days or something. There's a lot of ways to get a very similar benefit. And we can do bigger days. We can do back-to-back weekends. We can do frequent, very focused speed sessions. We can do cross training. We can do doubles. I've run some version of these for different people, and they all help you when it comes to running. There's a lot of ways to do this ultra thing. And the free programs on the internet look similar because they're easy and safe ways to program. And if I ever put one out, I'm sure it will look pretty similar too, because it is just an easy, safe way to program for a large amount of people. But they're not the only way. And a lot of CrossFit athletes do ultras, and they really only do short, fast speed work, and then maybe run a half marathon here and there. Brian McKenzie had his whole CrossFit endurance thing, and that was kind of his shtick. You just run soul crushing 200 to 800 meter repeats and then occasionally put in like a 10-mile long run. And his people finished 50Ks. They rarely won them, but they finished them. Now, it is absolutely not the best way to train for long distances. The CrossFit endurance thing like misses an entire half of your physiology that is very important for endurance work, but it is a way to do the thing. So there are a lot of ways to train, and you have to find one that fits you and fits your schedule and allows you to do at least most of the stuff that you find most important to you. And if you're in the middle of a big week, then you might have to just say, yep, vacuuming is low on the priority list for the next 3 weeks, but that shouldn't be your whole year. Your training plan shouldn't lead to like disrepair of your house and like a spousal separation because you do nothing but run. We should be able to fit everything into the grand scheme of your life. Burnout is hard, and I've dealt with it quite a bit, both for myself and with people I coach. And it is the reason I've not done one of these in the past couple of weeks, because I was burnout. And for me, the worst thing I can do is just push through it. So I've tried to like keep up some consistent short form stuff, but I needed a bit of a pause on the bigger stuff. So you need to figure out what works for you and how to fit all of the stuff that matters to you in your schedule. So whether it's restructuring your training schedule or just taking a week off, then do what you need to do. You need to keep the long game in mind. The biggest thing that tends to lead to like long-term failure for ultra athletes is they just hate it because they train so much that they just don't like doing it anymore. So if we can maybe, instead of taking a year to get where you want to be, take 2 and pace it out a little bit and make it actually fit your schedule. And I would bet that you'll have a much, much better time. So again, like figure out your why, take a break if you need it, and follow a plan that actually works for you. And that can help with the burnout. I hope this was helpful. I need to go train someone in person. I hope you have a great rest of your day.